And what if I told you that the most advanced civilization in human history existed more than 5,000 years ago and was completely wiped off the map? Scientists are uncovering disturbing evidence that before the flood, Earth was a completely different planet. One where 4-meter-tall giants dominated humanity. Technology existed that defies our modern understanding, and colossal creatures roamed the land that would make dinosaurs look like household pets. What really happened in that lost world that forced a total planetary reset? In this video, you'll discover 3 shocking revelations that will completely change everything you thought you knew about ancient history. First, how celestial beings corrupted human genetics, creating hybrid entities without empathy who ruled through terror. Second, why all life on the planet, not just humans, but animals and plants as well, was systematically altered through genetic manipulation that modern science would still struggle to replicate today. And third, the true reason for the flood, which had nothing to do with divine punishment and everything to do with a necessary planetary surgery to eliminate irreversible contamination. You'll understand why only one family survived, what was really inside Noah's Ark, and why this story explains archaeological mysteries that scientists still can't solve. If you love uncovering ancient mysteries that official history prefers to ignore, subscribe to the channel now, because what you're about to discover will blow your mind and make you question absolutely everything you've learned about the origins of human civilization.
Do you know that feeling of waking up in a completely different place and realizing that nothing, absolutely nothing, is the way you imagine it would be? That's exactly what would happen if you could travel back in time and land on Earth before the flood. We're talking about a planet that would challenge everything you learned in school about geology, biology, and even physics. Imagine a world where the sky wasn't blue as we know it today, but wrapped in a massive layer of water vapor that acted as a perfectly balanced natural greenhouse. Researchers at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem suggest that this atmospheric layer created barometric pressure far higher than what we experience now, completely changing the rules of the game. The climate, stable and tropical from the North Pole to the South Pole, with no extreme variations, no harsh winters, no devastating hurricanes. It was like living inside a gigantic planetary greenhouse, where temperatures barely fluctuated and humidity remained constant. But wait, there's something specialists rarely mention when they talk about this antediluvian period. Life in that environment wasn't just different. It was absurdly larger, more vigorous, and, let's be honest, far more dangerous than anything we see today. Think about it for a moment. If you walked through a forest in that era, you wouldn't find the delicate ferns that decorate modern gardens. No, my friend, you'd be standing before colossal ferns reaching up to 15 meters tall. That's the height of a 5-story building. Paleobotanical studies confirm that antediluvian vegetation grew on a scale we would consider impossible today without advanced cultivation technology. And the trees? Gigantic, with trunks so wide it would take 20 people holding hands just to wrap around them. And we're not talking about rare exceptions. This was a norm in that extraordinary ecosystem. The very composition of the air was different. Higher oxygen levels, allowing living organisms to grow to staggering sizes. It's as if the entire Earth were a natural laboratory designed to produce life on a monumental scale. Have you ever stopped to wonder why we find fossils of dragonflies with wingspans of 70 centimeters? Or fossilized tracks of millipedes the size of cars? Modern science struggles to explain how these organisms could breathe and move with such massive bodies under today's gravity. But here's the part that truly unsettles anyone who studies this period. The creatures that inhabited this antediluvian world were literal living monsters. I'm not exaggerating for dramatic effect. I mean that quite literally. The Book of Job, specifically chapter 40, describes a creature called Behemoth with such precise detail that modern paleontologists are left intrigued. Its strength is in its loins, and its power in the muscles of its belly. It moves its tail like a cedar. That hardly sounds like a hippopotamus, as some try to suggest in an overly simplistic way. We're talking about something colossal, something that would make an African elephant look like a stuffed toy. Now imagine yourself, an ordinary human being, trying to survive in an environment where predators the size of buses roam freely. The closest comparison we have today, the dinosaurs we see reconstructed in museums. Except those creatures were still walking the earth during this pre-flood period. Scientists debate whether the beings described in ancient texts are cultural memories of extinct animals or something even more extraordinary. What we know for sure is that human life in this context was anything but romantic or idealized. The raw, straightforward reality is that waking up in the world before the flood meant waking up knowing you might not survive until sunset. Every single day was a literal fight for survival. Not in the metaphorical sense we use today when we complain about traffic or a stressful job. We're talking about leaving your home knowing massive predators lurked in the shadows of those gigantic forests. Antediluvian humans developed survival skills we now only see in action movies. Lightning-fast thinking, flawless teamwork, and deep knowledge of their environment. They didn't have supermarkets, hospitals, or police forces. They had only their intelligence, strength, and whatever protection they could build. And yet, anthropological studies suggest that life expectancy before the flood was surprisingly high, with records of people living for centuries. That completely challenges our modern understanding of human biology, doesn't it? The combination of a different atmosphere, pure nutrition, and the absence of pollution created ideal conditions for longevity. But that didn't make life easy. On the contrary, living 900 years meant 900 years of facing those challenges day after day. Now, hold on to this information, because it's about to completely change your perspective. This extraordinary planet, with all its magnificence and dangers, was about to receive visitors who were not exactly from here. The antediluvian Earth, with its unique ecosystem and special atmosphere, caught the attention of beings observing from another plane of existence. These observers, known in ancient texts as Watchers, had their own plans for humanity, and when they decided to descend and interfere directly in earthly affairs, everything changed irreversibly. Their arrival would mark the beginning of an era that was even more extraordinary, and at the same time, much darker. What did these beings bring with them? Knowledge, but not just any kind of knowledge. We're talking about information humanity was not prepared to receive, and the consequences of this transfer of forbidden wisdom would echo through the centuries, shaping civilizations and eventually sealing the fate of that entire ancient world. Have you ever stopped to think about what would happen if a technologically advanced civilization decided to share all its knowledge with primitive society all at once? Chaos would be inevitable, right? That is exactly the kind of catastrophic event that marked an irreversible turning point in antediluvian history. The texts of the Book of Enoch describe in striking detail the descent of 200 celestial beings who abandoned their roles as silent observers of humanity. These Watchers, led by 20 commanders whose names still echo in ancient manuscripts, Semyaza, Azazel, Armoros, and others, made a pact on Mount Hermon that would change everything. Recent studies of archaeological documents from Mesopotamia support these narratives, showing that sudden, technologically advanced civilizations appeared seemingly out of nowhere. But here's the detail conventional history books prefer to ignore. These Watchers did not descend out of compassion or desire to help humanity evolve naturally. They had other interests, far more physical and selfish ones. And when immortal beings decide to satisfy mortal desires, the consequences are always disastrous. Genesis 6 presents this directly and without euphemisms. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves from all whom they chose. It sounds simple when you read it quickly, but think about the magnitude of that for a moment. We're talking about beings who did not belong to the natural human order, choosing partners among earthly women, not out of love or compatibility, but purely out of physical attraction. Researchers at the University of Oxford who study comparative mythology point out that virtually all ancient cultures have narratives about gods who descended and formed relationships with humans. Coincidence? Highly unlikely. The Greeks called their offspring demigods. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, and Hindu texts mention the Rishis. All echoes of the same central story. But what truly happened in these unions went far beyond reproduction. There was a genetic transfer that modern science would still struggle to fully explain. celestial DNA mixing with human DNA, creating hybrids that didn't fit into any known category. And these watchers knew exactly what they were doing. It was a deliberate, systematic corruption of original human genetics. But hold on, because this is nothing compared to what comes next. These fallen angels were not satisfied with corrupting the human bloodline through forbidden unions alone. They began teaching secrets that were meant to remain hidden from humanity. Azazel, specifically mentioned in the Book of Enoch, taught humans the art of warfare metallurgy, how to forge swords, knives, shields, and all kinds of weapons. Imagine society that barely mastered stone tools suddenly receiving complete knowledge of metal smelting, specialized alloys, and forging techniques that would normally take thousands of years to develop. Other watchers taught sorcery, the cutting of roots and plant for potions, astrology that allowed the prediction of future events, and even knowledge about cosmetics and adornments that fuel vanity. Semyaza taught enchantments and the magical use of plants. Armoros revealed the secrets of undoing spells. Barakel shared knowledge of astrology. Each had a specialty, each contaminating humanity with information that artificially accelerated civilizational development. It was advanced technology being dumped into a society that lacked the moral or spiritual maturity to handle it responsibly. Think about the scale of this transformation. Within just 1 or 2 generations, humanity leapt from a relatively simple existence into a complex civilization with advanced metallurgy, sophisticated astronomy, and elaborate mystical practices. It would be like aliens landing today and handing us interstellar travel, quantum manipulation, and biological immortality, without any ethical instruction manual. What do you think would happen? Exactly what happened in the antediluvian period. The knowledge was immediately corrupted and used for destructive purposes. Metallurgy that could have produced better agricultural tools was instead prioritized for increasingly lethal weapons. Astrology that could have helped with planting and harvesting became a tool for manipulation and control through predictions. Knowledge of medicinal plants was twisted into poisons and potions that altered consciousness in dangerous ways. Scientists who study the development of human technology are baffled when analyzing ancient artifacts that display metallurgical knowledge that theoretically should not have existed in those periods. How do you explain Sumerian cities with complex irrigation systems appearing almost overnight? How do you justify precise astronomical knowledge in cultures that supposedly had barely invented the wheel? But here's the crucial point that turns all of this from fascinating into absolutely terrifying. This transfer of knowledge was not a benevolent gift from cosmic mentors trying to help humanity. It was a calculated corruption, a deliberate sabotage of the original plan for the human species. The Watchers knew they were violating universal laws, which is why they made a pact among themselves on Mount Hermon, swearing mutual loyalty because they understood there would be consequences, and those consequences did not take long to appear. The women who united with these fallen angels began giving birth to children who were neither fully human nor fully celestial. Children born with innate knowledge, with enormous strength, with appetites that could not be satisfied by normal means. These hybrids, known as Nefilim, grew at a terrifying rate and reached sizes that defy everything we know about biology. And here's the part most people miss. The Nefilim were not just physically different. They lacked something fundamental that defines humanity. They had no empathy, no compassion, no sense of right and wrong, the moral awareness that even the most flawed humans possess. They were intelligent predators with overwhelming power and zero moral restraint. And these soulless giants were about to completely dominate the antediluvian world. Imagine witnessing the birth of a child who, within weeks, already reaches the size of a normal adult. It sounds like science fiction, but that is exactly what ancient texts describe about the Nefilim. These hybrid creatures, born from a union between the Watchers and human women, did not follow normal biological growth patterns. The Book of Enoch reports that these giants consumed the entire agricultural output of whole regions while still in childhood, growing so rapidly that their human mothers often died during childbirth or shortly afterward due to physical trauma. Researchers who study ancient mythologies are struck by the consistency of these narratives across cultures completely isolated from one another. The Greeks spoke of the Titans, the Norse of the Jotner, Native Americans of man-eating giants, all echoing the same central story of colossal beings that terrorize humanity. But here comes the most disturbing detail that usually goes unnoticed. We are not talking about merely tall or strong humans. The Nephilim represented an entirely new category of being, something that should not exist according to natural law, and that very unnatural existence was, in itself, an abomination that destabilized the entire created order. Now pay close attention to this detail, because it will make you rethink everything. Archaeological evidence of giant skeletons has been reported throughout history, although many of these discoveries are controversial or have mysteriously disappeared. 19th century American newspapers extensively documented findings of human skeletons measuring between 2.5 and 4 meters tall in Native American burial mounds. According to reports from that time, the Smithsonian Institution collected many of these skeletons, which later vanished from official records. Coincidence, or suppression of evidence that doesn't fit the established evolutionary narrative? Scientists fiercely debate this to this day. Regardless of modern controversies, ancient texts are absolutely clear. The Nephilim were giants who easily reached 4 meters in height. That's taller than 2 adult men stacked on top of each other. Compare that to Robert Wadlow, the tallest man ever recorded in the modern era, who stood 2.72 meters tall and suffered devastating health problems because of his height. The Nephilim were not only taller, but possessed bone density and muscle mass that would defy our understanding of human anatomy. Their strength was literally overwhelming, capable of destroying structures with bare hands and confronting the colossal creatures of the antediluvian world without weapons. But wait, there's something specialists rarely emphasize when discussing Nephilim. The problem wasn't only physical, it was deeply psychological and spiritual. These hybrids were born without something fundamental that defines humanity: the divine spark of empathy, the ability to feel genuine compassion for other beings. Think about it. What happens when you combine superior intelligence, overwhelming physical strength, and a total absence of moral remorse? You create the perfect predator. The Nephilim viewed ordinary humans the same way a human views ants: inferior creatures whose existence or suffering is irrelevant. Modern studies on psychopathy show us how individuals without empathy can cause massive destruction even with normal physical limitations. Now multiply that by superhuman strength and colossal size. Neuropsychologists who study sociopathic behavior explain that empathy is not just a pleasant emotion. It is the essential brake that prevents most people from deliberately harming others. Without that brake, without the ability to put oneself in another's place and feel their pain as one's own, any being becomes an existential threat to everyone around it. And that is exactly what the Nephilim were: walking existential dangers. Inevitably, these empathy-less giants rose to positions of absolute power over the regular human population. How could they not? They had crushing physical advantages, intelligence inherited from celestial parents, and no more restraint to stop them from using violence to get whatever they wanted. They became kings, warlords, tyrannical rulers who turned antediluvian society into a hierarchical nightmare. Imagine living under the rule of a being who could literally crush your skull with one hand and feel absolutely nothing if you displease it in any way. Ancient texts state that there was tyranny on the earth in those days, a phrase that takes on terrifying depth once you understand who those tyrants were. They established systems of rule based purely on force and fear, where questioning orders meant instant and brutal death. There was no justice, no mercy, no appeal. The word of Nephilim was absolute law, and that law was often arbitrary, cruel, and designed solely to satisfy the limitless appetites of these creatures. And speaking of appetites, this is where the story becomes even darker and more disturbing. The Nephilim began to develop hunger that normal agricultural production could no longer satisfy. The Book of Enoch explicitly describes a horrifying progression. First, they consumed all human food production. Then they began devouring animals whole, raw, without preparation, without cooking. And finally, and this is a part that unsettles even the most skeptical researchers, they developed a taste for human flesh. This is not metaphor or dramatic exaggeration. The texts are literal and direct. The giants began hunting humans for consumption, turning the entire population into living cattle for their cannibalistic feasts. Anthropologists who study cannibalism in human societies explain that the practice usually arises from extreme necessity or ritual behavior, but never as a systematic dietary preference. The Nephilim broke even that pattern. making cannibalism routine and preferred. Extreme violence became not only tolerated, but celebrated and institutionalized. Bloody rituals, gladiators forced to fight to the death for entertainment, mass human sacrifices. All of this became normal life under Nephilim rule. And here is what truly seals the horror of the situation. This was not the result of ignorance or primitive barbarism. It was advanced civilization with sophisticated technology consciously choosing cruelty as its mode of operation. And this moral corruption was only beginning to spread in even more insidious ways. Have you ever stopped to consider how far humanity can fall once all ethical and moral limits are removed? The antediluvian world gives us a terrifying answer to that question. What began with the Watchers corrupting human genetics through Nephilim evolved into something far more extensive and disturbing: the systematic genetic manipulation of all life on the planet. The biblical text in Genesis uses an enigmatic phrase that still puzzles scientists and theologians today. All flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth. Wait, all flesh? Not just humans, but animals too? Exactly. Recent studies of ancient mythologies reveal consistent descriptions of hybrid creatures that defy biology. Sphinxes with the body of a lion and head of a human, centaurs half man and half horse, satyrs, minotaurs, chimeras of every kind. You probably thought these were just creative Greek fantasies, right? But what if they were distorted cultural memories of real genetic experiments conducted in the antediluvian period? Apocryphal texts describe in detail how fallen angels taught techniques of unnatural crossbreeding between species that should never have been mixed. It was primitive genetic engineering, but effective enough to produce abominations that fit into no natural category. Consider the magnitude of this for a moment. Modern scientists, with all our advanced technology, electron microscopes, DNA sequencers, cutting-edge laboratories, have taken decades to achieve even basic genetic modifications in simple organisms. And here we're talking about an ancient civilization managing to create viable hybrids between completely different species. How? The forbidden knowledge transmitted by the Watchers included secrets about manipulating the very essence of life. Secrets we are still trying to rediscover. Researchers in genetics are baffled when studying certain ancient artifacts that seem to depict knowledge of heredity and genetic traits that theoretically should not have existed at that time. Sumerian cylinders display symbols that some interpret as representations of double helix DNA. Thousands of years before Watson and Crick. Coincidence? Scientists argue fiercely. But the central point is undeniable. There was knowledge in the antediluvian world that was completely lost in the flood. And perhaps that loss was intentional, because that knowledge in the wrong hands, or rather, in the hands of the Nephilim and corrupted humans, produced biological horrors. But here's the part that truly shifts everything from fascinating to absolutely terrifying. The corruption was not only genetic, it was simultaneously moral and spiritual. Human society living under Nephilim dominance began to reflect the lack of empathy of its giant rulers. The biblical text records that the earth was filled with violence and that every intention of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil continually. We are not talking about occasional crimes or sporadic wickedness. It was constant, systematic perversity that became the culture itself. The example of Lamech, a descendant of Cain, perfectly illustrates this moral degradation. He boasted of killing a man for wounding him and a young man for merely striking him. Murder over absolutely trivial reasons. And not only that, but pride in the act itself. Anthropologists who study violent societies explain that there is usually some kind of honor code, some system of rules, even in warrior cultures. But the antediluvian world had gone beyond even that. This was violence for the sake of violence. Cruelty as a form of entertainment. Evil as a normal way of life. Imagine a society where killing someone because they annoyed you is considered not just acceptable, but admirable. Now hold on to this, because it will completely change your perspective. While all of this was happening on the surface, Nephilim ruling, humans morally degenerating, hybrid creatures roaming the earth, there was another layer of corruption taking place that was even more insidious. The Watchers and their descendants did not stop at the genetic manipulation of animals and humans. Apocryphal texts suggest they even attempted to corrupt plants, altering seeds, and creating vegetation that produced hallucinogenic or poisonous effects for population control and mystical rituals. It was total ecosystem contamination. Think about it. In a world where even the food you grow may have been genetically altered to harm you, where animals are unpredictable hybrids, where your rulers are remorseless cannibal giants, and where your human neighbors would kill you for any trivial reason, how do you survive? The simple answer is, you probably don't. Most didn't. Evolutionary biologists who study mass extinctions explain that when an ecosystem is disrupted beyond a certain point, an irreversible cascade collapse occurs. The antediluvian world had crossed that threshold long ago. And here's a final detail that ties this entire tragedy into a clear understanding. There was no longer any pure human DNA. Think about that. If the Nefilim had been reproducing with humans for generations, if genetic manipulation was happening on a massive scale, if all flesh had corrupted its way, then the very definition of human was being erased. It was total genetic contamination of the species. Modern geneticists explain that when foreign DNA is introduced uncontrollably into a population, the original lineage eventually ceases to exist. Everything becomes hybrid. And that is exactly what was happening. Original humanity, created with a specific purpose, was being systematically erased through forced interbreeding with the Nefilim, and possibly even with animal hybrids produced by forbidden experiments. The few genetically pure humans who remained lived in hiding, terrified, dwindling with each generation. There was only one family, the family of Noah, that still preserved the original genetic lineage intact. And this is where the story takes a direction that very few truly grasp in its full magnitude. Because what was about to happen was not a divine outburst of anger against sinners, but something far more specific and necessary. A surgical cleansing to eliminate irreversible contamination that threatened not only humanity, but all life on the planet. Have you ever stopped to think about what you would do if you discovered that a deadly disease was spreading through your body in an irreversible way? The medical response would be clear. Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. Drastic methods that destroy disease cells even if they cause temporary suffering to the patient. That is exactly the most precise analogy for understanding the flood. It was not arbitrary punishment. It was surgical intervention on a planetary scale. The antediluvian world had reached a point of no return where genetic and moral contamination was so widespread that preserving any part of the system would mean allowing the cancer to keep spreading. Medical ethics researchers explain that in extreme situations, saving the patient sometimes requires measures that seem cruel when viewed superficially, but are absolutely necessary once the severity of the condition is understood. And here is a detail that completely transforms our understanding of the flood. It was not about destroying for the sake of destruction. It was about preserving what was still pure by eliminating what was irreversibly corrupted. The Nephilim, with their impossible hybrid DNA, could not be saved or redeemed because their very nature violated the fundamental laws of creation. It was cosmic chemotherapy, painful, devastating, but absolutely necessary. Now pay close attention to this fact, because it will make you rethink everything about Noah's Ark. That structure was not just a large boat. It was literally a floating genetic bank preserving the original biology of every land species. Modern naval engineers who study the biblical dimensions of the Ark are impressed by its stability and load capacity. At 135 meters long, 22.5 meters wide, and 13.5 meters high, that's longer than a football field, the Ark had roughly 40,000 cubic meters of usable space spread across 3 decks. Compare that to the Titanic, which was 269 meters long. The Ark had half the length, but it was designed not for speed or luxury, but for maximum stability and cargo capacity. Hydrodynamic studies confirm that the proportions described in the Bible create a vessel that is nearly impossible to capsize, capable of withstanding colossal waves without sinking. But here's the point most people completely miss. Noah didn't need to collect every species on the planet, only the original basic kinds. Each animal that entered the Ark carried pure DNA, uncorrupted by the Watcher's genetic experiments. It was the intentional preservation of the original genetic library of creation. But wait, there's something specialists rarely emphasize when discussing the flood. The water didn't come only from rain. The biblical text is very specific. All the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of heaven were opened. That describes a dual origin cataclysm. subterranean water erupting under massive pressure, and at the same time the collapse of the atmospheric vapor layer that created the planetary greenhouse effect we mentioned at the beginning. Geologists studying rock formations find evidence of massive water catastrophes on virtually every continent. Sedimentary layers showing rapid deposition, marine fossils on mountaintops, vast coal and oil deposits indicating sudden burial of organic matter on an enormous scale. Scientists debate the interpretations, but the physical data is there. Imagine the scene. The ground literally exploding as gigantic aquifers under extreme pressure rupture to the surface, while at the same time the sky collapses in relentless torrential rain. This was not a gradual flood that allowed escape. It was instant devastation on a global scale. People woke up on what seemed like a normal day, believing the most advanced civilization in history would last forever. Within hours, everything was submerged. Now think about the tragic irony of it all. That antediluvian civilization mastered advanced metallurgy, precise astronomy, possibly even genetic engineering. They had built magnificent cities, colossal palaces, breathtaking works of art. The Nephilim ruled vast empires with technologies that even today would be considered extraordinary. And everything, absolutely everything, was erased within a matter of weeks. Not a single pyramid remained. No library survived. No magnificent city was left standing. The waters covered even the highest mountain peaks, ensuring total elimination. Archaeologists are puzzled by the lack of evidence of truly advanced civilizations prior to roughly 5,000 years ago. And what if the reason is simple? What if everything that came before was literally wiped off the map, buried under massive layers of sediment, transformed into oil and coal by pressure and time? The most advanced civilization in human history existed and was completely erased, leaving behind only fragmented memories preserved in the midst of every culture. The flood was impossible to survive without specific preparation, and that preparation was offered only to those who still possessed pure DNA and righteous character. And here's a conclusion that brings this entire picture together with striking clarity. Noah's Ark, floating on waters that cover the entire world, carried within it the last hope for a new beginning. While giants drowned, their overwhelming strength rendered useless against water that swallowed everything. While hybrid animals perished without leaving descendants, while all forbidden technology sank beneath kilometers of water, that wooden vessel quietly preserved the genetic seeds of a new world. This was not random genocide. It was precise surgery, removing cancer in order to save the patient. When the waters finally receded and Noah opened the doors of the ark on a mountain called Ararat, what emerged was a completely different planet. The atmospheric greenhouse effect was gone, giving rise to seasonal climates. Vegetation would no longer grow to colossal proportions. Animals would be smaller, more docile, and humanity would be given a second chance, beginning with just 8 people who carried both the memory of the ancient world and the pure DNA necessary to rebuild the species. But the memories of those giants, that forbidden knowledge, that lost civilization will continue to echo through generations, in stories, myths, and warnings about what happens when certain boundaries are crossed that were never meant to be crossed. But the story doesn't end here, because what happened after the flood is even more intriguing. Think about it with me. If the Nephilim drowned, how do we later find account of giants like Goliath and the sons of Anak after flood? Where did these new giants come from? There's something you were never told about how this story continues, and it changes everything. The Watchers who caused all that corruption were imprisoned, but was all the forbidden knowledge they passed on really lost in the waters? Or did Noah and his sons carry with them fragments of that technological memory? Fragments that mysteriously resurface in post-flood civilizations like Sumer, Egypt, and Babylon? Had you ever noticed this connection between the antediluvian world and ancient civilizations that seem to appear out of nowhere with impossible astronomical knowledge and engineering that defies explanation? Did you know that the pyramids, Stonehenge, and other megalithic structures may be distant echoes of that forbidden knowledge that survived the flood? Here's the question that will make you question everything. if the art preserved only pure DNA? How we explain the fact that soon after the flood, massive megalithic constructions appear again? Structures that seem to require superhuman strength to build? Who or what really built them? What do you think? Is it possible that part of the Nephilim survived in some way? Could the knowledge of the Watchers have been secretly preserved and passed down from generation to generation through hidden societies? Share your theory in the comments. I want to know if you believe there are still descendants of that corrupted lineage operating in secret today. And if this blew your mind with possibilities you had never considered, hit the like button so this content can reach more people who are searching for hidden truths. And since you made it this far, hungry for answers, you can't miss the next video on how modern architects recreated the Tabernacle of Moses, and what they discovered will shake your faith. The mathematical proportions and prophetic symbolism they uncovered connect directly to everything you just learned about the plan of restoration after flood. Thank you for going deep with me into knowledge that few have the courage to explore. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because in the next videos we're going to uncover where the post-flood giants went, what impossible technologies they left behind, and why modern governments want to keep these archaeological discoveries hidden. The truth about our past is far more fascinating and disturbing than any fiction. See you soon as we uncover even more mysteries.